it is September the 17th and we are live. We are going to be talking all things global mobility. We've got immigration updates, we've got tax updates, and of course we have our very special guest of the week. And this week I'm so excited, we have backstage the wonderful Emily Stirling from Hubspot, who is going to be talking about creating an intentionally distributed culture, which is something that HubSpot has done, which is just a fascinating new way of looking at mobility, intentional relocation, intentional remote working. It's going to be a fascinating discussion. You are going to love that. But before that, of course, we have our immigration updates and we have our tax updates. So there's a lot going on this week as ever. I don't know what it is, what it's like where you are in the world, but where I am right here, it's beginning to feel like fall. The autumn is really here, that summer now sadly seems to be over. We're moving on into the fall season. And well, it's an exciting time, isn't it, when the seasons change? So everybody, tell us what's going on in your world, what's going on. I put there, join the conversation, write in the comments box, tell us who you are, where you are, what's going on in your world. And let us know as we go through the discussion, any comments, any thoughts that you've got that you want to share with us. We are live on LinkedIn. We are live on YouTube. We are also available on Spotify. So if you want to hear us as a podcast, then just get it on Spotify as well. Now, I know a lot of you like to get your CPE codes, and we're really excited. We have CPE codes from ERC, from SHRM, and from HRCI. So if you want your CPE codes, here they are. So many thanks to our good friends at Worldwide ERC, and of course, they've got their big event coming up shortly in Salt Lake City. So if you want your CPE codes from ERC, the GMS or the CRP codes, there they are. But also if you want your HRCI or your SHRM codes, again, they are there. And many thanks to our good friends at Rocket Mortgage for providing those codes. Those are there for you. Next week, we've got another very interesting discussion. A lot of us sort of get into mobility and sort of stay in mobility. But what about moving in and out of mobility? So next week, we're going to be talking about breaking the swim lane, how to build a zigzag career, rethinking career journeys in talent mobility. And our guest next week is the amazing Louise Atkinson from Babcock. So that's next week, breaking the swim lane. I'm sure you are going to love that. Meanwhile, what's been going on in the amazing world of global mobility in the last 7 days? Well, I'll tell you what, let's run the video. Let's see who has been promoted, who's got a new job, and indeed what job opportunities are out there right here, right now. So there we have it. Lots of people have been promoted. Many congratulations to you. Lots of people have got new jobs. Many congratulations to you too. And of course, if you are looking, there's lots of job opportunities out there, and we try and publicize all that we can find. But if you've got a job opportunity that you want to promote, or if you've had a promotion, or if you've got a new job you want to tell the world about, then drop us a note on LinkedIn or via email, and we'll very happily do what we can to promote your opportunity. We're now going to move on to talk about immigration. Julie Onslow-Cole cannot be with us today, but don't worry, we've got the amazing Anna Sophia Walsh from Fragaman, who's going to give us a European update. So you know how it works. So hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's welcome onto our stage for the very first time, Anna Sophia Walsh. Hi, Anna Sophia. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. As I said before, long-time listener, first-time speaker, so pleased to be here.
Great. And whereabouts in the world are you?
So today I'm in Brussels, in Belgium, where Fragaman also has an office serving our continental Europe teams.
Cool. Okay, so what do you want to talk to us about today?
So today I'll briefly cover key updates impacting short-term travel to the European Union's Schengen area. So as a quick background, the Schengen area is an area that includes around 29 countries without internal borders, with more than 400 million EU and non-EU citizens. There are harmonized rules for visas and documentation for short-term travel. However, it's evolving, and employers with staff traveling into and out of Europe need to stay ahead of these changes. So the key areas that I'll highlight today will be covered in more depth by some of my colleagues in a webinar next week, should you be interested. But firstly, a reminder that Bulgaria and Romania are now full Schengen area members. They started issuing Schengen C visas for visa-required nationals. So these include Indian nationals, for instance. For visa-exempt travelers, like UK or US nationals, the important detail to be mindful of here is that days spent in Bulgaria or Romania will now count towards the overall Schengen allowance of 90 days in any 180-day period.
And that's with effect from when?
That was from effect from the end of last year.
Right.
Turning to the digitization of the external borders, so beginning in October this year, the Entry-Exit System, or EES as it's more commonly known, will finally roll out progressively across airports, seaports, and land borders. So this digitization of the external border replaces passport stamps with a digital record. So it logs biometric data, timestamps, and automatically tracks how long each traveler stays within the area. So this applies to non-EU nationals, both visa holders and visa-exempt nationals. So the takeaway here is that overstays will be much easier for authorities to detect. So these companies moving staff into and around Europe need to tighten and centralize compliance monitoring, as the EES will create a clear and transparent record of every entry and exit. So any mistake...
This is huge, isn't it? Because in the current days of wet stamping, as they called it, you know, the chances of actually being fully caught on your precise dates were, you know, it might or might not happen, but it was pretty, in some cases, pretty remote. Whereas now it's going to be presumably pretty much all cases are going to be caught automatically.
Spot on. So any mistakes or irregular travel patterns will come to light more easily with the authorities, but also there will be far less leniency with these types of mistakes. And another wrinkle is that currently there are also temporary internal border checks in some countries like Germany, the Netherlands, and Poland, and border guards may also request identification documents and perform detailed checks. So even internally, where usually there's no borders, travelers crossing these affected countries need to be sure to have valid ID, and employees and employers need to ensure that HR and mobility teams reinforce this 90-day limit rule, because they may even be caught out internally within the Schengen area. So looking ahead, so beyond October of this year, in 2026, there will also be more upcoming digitization of systems and digital visas. So the much lauded European Travel Information and Authorization System, also known as ETIAS, is finally scheduled for rollout in late 2026. So this is a pre-travel authorization like the US ESTA or the UK ETA, and it's for visa-exempt travelers. So these are US, UK, Canadian, or Australian nationals, for example, who are on short-term travel to these Schengen area countries and will need to apply for this pre-travel authorization before departures. And while 2026 is a little while away, it's important to start building this pre-travel authorization into the planning processes so that trips are not disrupted by these missed authorizations. Additionally, for visa required nationals, like I said, like Indian nationals, for instance, Schengen C visas are going to be moving fully online. So it really completes the circle. This means that we're moving again away from paper-based forms for these Schengen visas, moving away from in-person consular visits, visa stickers towards a digital online first process. So this is scheduled for 2028. So again, for employers, this means faster, more transparent processing, but it also again means that companies will need to adapt internal processes to track these applications digitally. So really, if I was to summarize and to wrap up a little bit, for employers, it's crucial to reinforce these good practices ahead of the changes manifesting themselves in the coming years and months, to understand which traveler populations are affected, so visa required, visa exempt, or both. And really, compliance. You'll hear this from all of your immigration professionals going forward. We're already seeing a digital first approach to audits by authorities, and it will just continue. And also just to keep up to date on the timelines for these latest changes. The goalposts have moved. And so these movements also need to be factored into the integrated into your mobility programs.
So do we know when people will first be able to apply for their ETS, when people will actually be able to start using it?
The current time and date is for Q4 of 2026. Now, this time and date has moved several times in the past, but now that the entry-exit system, which was a precursor for it, is definitely rolling out in October, we're far more confident that this will definitely occur in Q4 of 2026.
Okay, so an EES is coming in October.
Correct.
That's starting. They're doing it country by country, aren't they? Rolling it out.
It's all of the countries, but it's a progressive rollout depending on whether it will be seaports, airlines, etc. So it'll be a bit of a fragmented approach. There will be some leniency initially, but then it will be a full rollout after about 6 months or so.
So the world is changing. Anna Sophia, thank you so much for that update. Welcome to your first appearance on The View from the Top. You smashed it. And we are very, very grateful to have you on the show. We're now going to move on to do a tax update. And we've got backstage the wonderful Julie Barron from Vialto Partners. So you know how it works. Let's say a big, big thank you to Anna Sophia, a big welcome to Julie in the time-honored fashion of hit the heart button, hit the like button, and hit that applause button. Julie, welcome to the show again. Good to see you.
Hello, Brian. I feel like it's been forever, Brian.
I know, we've had our summer vacation.
I know.
But Julie, when I was talking to Anna Sophia just now, we were talking about the world going digital. And I think you're on the same theme, aren't you? So tell us a bit about your take on digitalization with the IRS.
Yes, I'm going to talk about electronic payments, which is interesting. So I think I'd discussed this maybe late spring this year, but I thought I would bring it up again because we have a looming deadline. So there was an executive order issued by President Trump in March stating that the U.S. Treasury would no longer be issuing paper checks, nor would they be accepting paper checks as a form of payment. So basically, we're going to go digital, kind of like Europe did about 20 years ago, right, Brian? So we in the US, we still do a lot of paper checks, and most of the rest of the world does not. So we now have a looming deadline for refund checks. So the details of the executive order said that they would accept paper checks. So the Treasury will accept paper checks, but will stop as soon as is practicable. So we don't have a deadline on that, on when they will stop accepting paper checks, but we know it's coming. What we do have a deadline for is the issuance of refund checks. So what that means is, in order to get a refund for your tax return, you're going to have to include direct deposit information. And the deadline there is September 30th. So we have 13 days. And unless we get an exception or extension to this rule, which we're expecting some exceptions, but we haven't gotten them yet. Anyway, we will not be able to receive paper refund checks. And we've been speaking to so many clients about this, because where we see this is for foreign nationals who come into the US and maybe are just a short-term business traveler here. They've spent 3-4 months in the US, but they owe US tax, but they don't open a US bank account while they're here. And they go home to their home country. Their employer has covered their tax, but now there's no way to get any refund if there's a refund on their tax return without direct deposit. And what the IRS stipulations are right now on refund checks is that the name on the tax return has to match the name on the bank account. So you can't direct deposit a check into your employer's account, right? It has to be a bank account with the individual's name on it. So there are some workarounds, and everybody should talk to their providers about what those workarounds are, because if you have individuals who, again, don't have bank accounts, or a lot of times we'll see people who are here 3 or 4 years, they leave the US, they still have a couple more years of US tax returns to do, but in the meantime, they wanted to clean up their finances and they closed their bank account. So they don't have those bank accounts anymore. But some of the workarounds involve some of the bigger banks will allow you to set up sub-accounts as a company. So those sub-accounts could potentially have an individual's name on them. There's also some fintech companies out there that will allow you to open a US bank account as a non-resident, and it's fairly clean and simple. But what that means for employers in the mobility world is you're going to have to ask some of these people to set up US bank accounts. And, I went to the US for 3 months. I went home. I'm back in the UK and happy. I don't really want to deal with opening a US bank account. So, but that might be the only option in the coming days. So we will see what happens. What we don't know is if I filed my tax return 2 months ago and I still haven't gotten my refund check, are they just not going to issue a refund check to me and I'll get a letter saying, please give us your direct deposit information? We just don't know what's going to happen. But everybody who has individuals in this situation, really start planning for what are you going to do about these refunds? And even further out, how are we going to make tax payments without being able to write a paper check? So just something for everybody to be thinking about and planning for.
Presumably you can still pay in blood.
You can pay in blood, absolutely. I pay in blood every day, Brian.
But joking aside, and sorry for that, is that so all payments that you receive back are going to be now into an account, and the account must be in the same name. So if you've changed your name for any reason, for example,
it just has to match your tax return. So whatever you put on your tax return, the bank account has to match. So you've got to fix that and make sure they match.
Yeah. Okay. So, and anybody currently on assignment, when they leave, they need to keep their US bank account.
Yes. So that is something I try to tell people, please don't close your bank accounts. But a lot of people just do, right? Yeah. They just want to clean things up and not have this bank account out there. So they close their bank accounts. Another choice is to apply your refund to the next year. So if you're going to have to file for 2 years, you can just do that. But, it doesn't work for everyone. So everybody needs to start thinking about, how are we going to handle this?
And this comes into effect in what? The end of the month?
30th. September 30th.
Okay, so that's whatever, 13 days away. So let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's definitely one. I mean, we are getting some great tips and thoughts today. Yes. So thank you for that, Julie. And again, we had Anna Sophia's advice on what's going on in the Schengen area as well. So we're now going to move on, and our next guest is the wonderful Emily Stirling from Hubspot, who's going to be telling us all about creating an intentionally distributed culture, which is trust me, is a fascinating conversation. So everybody, you know how it works. As we say goodbye to Julia and we welcome to our stage Emily Stirling, please hit the heart button, hit the like button, and hit the applause button. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let's start off at the beginning. Whereabouts in the world are you?
I am in the Portland metro area, technically Washington State. And so I'm just getting my day started on the West Coast, and this is sunshine in Portland. So all of us Northwest folks are real excited about having a sunny fall day today.
a little bit of sunshine in your life.
That's
and
right.
We're going to put a bit of sunshine in the life of our audience as we talk about mobility at Hubspot. But before we get on to mobility at Hubspot, I just want to find out a bit about your particular career journey, Emily. So, I know you're a California native, but tell us a bit about your early days and how you got into this wonderful industry. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Southern California, but actually had a very internationally oriented growing up. My parents were missionaries, lived abroad, traveled abroad quite a bit, multilingual. I traveled quite a bit before I even turned 18 across Europe and Central America. And so going to college, I knew I wanted to have a very internationally minded career. And so got a business degree in international business and nonprofit work. And so that's how I kind of prepared for this industry. So I'm kind of one of those rare ones that knew that I wanted to get into something like this and found my way directly into mobility straight out of college.
So you actually studied international business for your bachelor's.
That's right.
And which is it's relatively rare. I mean, a lot of people, me included, sort of fall into mobility.
That's right.
One way or another, but you sort of knew from a fairly early age that you wanted to be in mobility.
That's
Probably
right.
partly impacted by the fact of your life growing up as a child, that, your parents were moving around the world. So
Yeah.
an early taste of it. Okay, so you started off then, you at university, I think you told me in San Diego, is that right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And then you moved on and you started your working life at Deloitte.
That's right. I was really lucky to graduate from Point Loma Nazarene University, small private school, but with a really, really amazing business program. And that's really well connected to the business community. And so I found my way very quickly to Deloitte, and I started out my career doing international assignment services. So we were very much focused on helping employees navigate their assignments and working closely with sub-suppliers. So a lot of what RMCs do today, that was my first job in mobility, and went on to do quite a lot of other things at Deloitte. So got a taste for all angles of the mobility industry.
So you did things like tax return prep and
Yes.
meetings and all the sort of stuff that anybody who's worked for one of the big four firms in what I call the expat departments, IAS, people services, what the name changes all the time, but we know what we're talking about, and you were doing that sort of stuff. So what made you then switch to say you didn't want to be a consultant? Could you jump to the other side of the fence and you went from being a consultant advising to an in-house role at Hubspot? What made you want to switch from one side of the fence to the other?
Well, the last thing that I was doing at Deloitte was a lot of more of the consulting aspects, thinking about the future of mobility policies, mobility org structure, mobility strategy. And I loved being able to, it's a great way to learn and grow because you get exposure to so many different companies, their different cultures. And I just really developed a love of growing tech companies. And I had a desire to kind of dig a little deeper. Instead of sort of going across lots of companies, I wanted to focus on one company and be able to kind of grow with them. And HubSpot, this HubSpot position came up as an opportunity and fell in love with the company and what we do here.
Okay, so I think a lot of people will know HubSpot. It's pretty well known. I know at Benevo we're a client of yours. We use HubSpot. But for those people who don't know HubSpot, tell us a bit about the company, what it does, and a bit about its history and background.
Yeah. HubSpot is a CRM, and so a very AI leaning, very forward thinking CRM in the space right now. Salesforce is the platform that I think a lot of enterprise sized organizations are really comfortable with and familiar with. HubSpot's business segment is really focused on small to medium sized business. And so the platform, I think, really lends itself for everyday people to start a business and grow their business from the ground up, as well as medium-sized businesses who don't necessarily have a whole department thinking about how to use a CRM. You can get started in it really quickly, and we're doing some amazing things with AI right now that are making that even easier for companies to grow. It's a very exciting place to be right now.
Okay, and give us an idea of the size and scale of HubSpot, because I mean, it's not that old a company. I think I read it started in 2006, was it, or so?
That's right, 2006, IPO'd, I think 2014, and I should know these things. But we are, when I first joined HubSpot, we were around 6,000 employees, and now we're close to 9, a little over 9. So we're growing fast, but still in that, medium-sized tech company, scaling quickly segment. It's a fun place.
Okay. And HubSpot's based in Boston, yeah?
That's right. We're a Boston-based tech company, which I think makes us pretty unique. I think I've been on the West Coast most of my career. I've spent a lot of time in the Bay Area tech companies, Seattle tech area, tech space. So this has been a fun new angle to the tech industry.
We're going to get on to hybrid working in a moment, but I'm just looking at you. You're in Portland, and HubSpot's based in Boston. Okay, so you're not exactly a stone's throw away.
No.
How does that work? I mean, so tell us a bit about your personal experience of remote working.
Yeah, I've actually worked remotely most of my career. So, in mobility, I think we lend ourselves to, you stay put in one place and then work with all different time zones. And I love the West Coast because I get that opportunity to have some good overlap in the evenings with the JPAC time zone that makes I can hit all time zones pretty well. I would say at HubSpot, we've really leaned into hybrid work. And we've stayed committed to it. So some of the RTOs that you're seeing out there, return to office initiatives, that's really not necessarily what we're focused on right now. And so I think it's pretty common at our company to be pretty dispersed across the US. And then when we need to, we can get together, whether that be outside of, with local colleagues that are actually working here at HubSpot in the Portland area, or sometimes I pop up to Seattle to see all my Seattle HubSpotters, or business traveling to some of our major regional hubs.
So you'll liaise locally with other HubSpotters who are based in Portland or Seattle, who may not be in your area. They may not be mobility people.
That's right.
Yeah, but just other people who work for the same company to talk about do you have company socials, or is it company cross line?
Yeah, we're able to meet up, and we have some opportunities to co-work together. So we everybody go to a co-working space. We've got opportunities to do social activities. We have a really robust and amazing hybrid work strategy that really facilitates and drives some of that momentum to be able to create community without necessarily dedicated real estate investment. And I think it's a pretty thoughtful strategy that seems to be working well for us.
Okay, so when we were prepping for this, you talked in terms of creating an intentionally distributed culture. Just talk us through that phrase. What does that mean in to your mind, an intentionally distributed culture?
Well, I feel like in history we've got this whole in the tech industry, being in person was so critical, and it was very highly revered, and a lot of tech companies really valued that in-person time across all talent types. I think the pandemic really made us all question that. We realized we can do a lot. And so the pendulum swung from in-person to fully remote.
Yeah, because nobody had a choice. Yeah. We
didn't have a choice. And a lot of companies doubled down on that for several, even when we did have choices, we doubled down on it. And now you're seeing sort of that almost pendulum swing back where we're saying, no, we have all this real estate, we need to make good use of it. And there's growing pains with working remotely, right? And so what I think is happening is sort of this very extreme swinging back and forth. And so I would say, at HubSpot, we're talking a lot about, we're very committed to hybrid work. We see it has been very successful for us, but we're thinking about how do we not over pivot here? How do we not pendulum swing back and find thoughtful ways to grow and scale intentionally? So it's not organic, it's not haphazard. It's thoughtful on how we create really collaborative teams. So we think a lot about proximity, time zone, access to travel and ability to travel, and where our centers of gravity are. And I think it's really doubling down on the commitment to hybrid and evolving and iterating on that so that we're really making this work for the long haul.
Okay. One of the challenges that I've heard a lot of people say is that a hybrid culture is great for senior people, but how do you train junior people, the graduates, the interns? How do you deal with that?
I would say this is a journey we're on. We don't have all of this figured out, but that's something that we have a really close mind to. And so there's some things we're being really intentional about. When we think about intentionality, we're thinking about where people are at their career, what is the work that they do, who their customers are. And so when we think about intentionally growing our teams, that's really, level, where you are in your career is a big part of that, to make maybe there's centers of gravity that are more important to create as you start your career.
Okay. So I think you told me before the pandemic, you were doing less than 5 assignments a year.
That's right.
Now your number, will you tell us the number of requests you get now?
Yeah. So, our mobility program before the pandemic was pretty limited. We kind of hired very intentionally, had a little bit of regional permanent transfers to start your job. We had a couple, just a handful of assignments when we were opening new offices, et cetera. But we weren't using mobility as a strategic tool very significantly at HubSpot. The pandemic changed that because of this hybrid work. And so a lot of the volume and focus historically for mobility at HubSpot has been personally driven mobility. It's about we have a very global workforce who has ties, and no one is a citizen of one place. There's it's a very complicated thing. And we in the mobility industry feel this for sure, right? We are all often have very unique ways of how we've navigated our globe. And HubSpot's workforce is like that. And so we have created some mobility programs that have been very intentional to attract that kind of diverse mindset and global thinkers. And that means we need to have a mobility benefits program that supports that. So we have an international remote work program that we see about 3,000 requests a year. And that's
whoa. So we've gone from less than 5 pre-pandemic to 3,000 plus.
Yeah.
Okay. And you only got about 9,000 staff. So it's pretty much a third of your population.
That's right. And I will say that's requests, not individuals goings. But when we talk about volume of what are we looking at, it's real high. Yeah. It's a lot of change for our team. HubSpot's grown a lot. Our team has grown a lot. And I think, one of the things to acknowledge is the team that we've got. Shout out to HubSpot mobility team here. They've had to really make a lot of pivots.
Let's give a big shout out to your team. Let's just do that. How many people are in the team? Tell us about them, and let's give them that kudos.
Yeah, they are an amazing team of mobility professionals that are spread out across the globe. We've got 9 of us, and we've got 3 of us that are program managers that are really focused on connecting with our vendors from a strategic perspective, and then managing our policies and programs and technology. And then we've got a team of mobility partners who are really in with the business. So those are regionally dispersed in each region. So in the US, in EMEA, and then in Singapore and JPAC to support JPAC. And these folks are there to support in time zone and in proximity to all of our business stakeholders, but our employees in region as well. So they're doing a lot of growth in thinking about mobility differently because we are so personally driven in a lot of the volume that we see.
Wow. So if there's any HubSpotters in the audience, then write in the comments. Let us know you're out there. We'll give you a shout out. So Emily, so you've gone from, as I said, virtually nothing in terms of the size of your population to 3,000 plus. Tell us, how does that work then? I mean, are these people working internationally, domestically? How do they apply? Tell us a bit about the mechanics of it all.
Yeah, we had to lean really heavily on technology. That was, I think, the obvious first step is, and we had an amazing, our first rev was actually some custom workflows in Workday. So kudos to our amazing HRS. Hey, Kaz, good to see you. Thanks for joining, Kaz.
Shout out to Kaz.
So we had amazing partners in Workday that got us quickly to at least some automated workflows that helped us sort of address our initial first volumes through the pandemic. What we realized is that long term, we needed something that had a little bit more depth of mobility expertise to be able to handle some of the compliance and risks considerations. Obviously during the pandemic, when we were doing this, we were just like trying to know where people are. But as we exit the pandemic, there's to be able to keep a program like this, you really have to be tied into Alexis. Yay! I love that you all are joining us. Thanks, Alexis. Amazing team in the US. So we definitely had to have a really strong risk conversation. And that was really important to invest upfront rather than doing on a case-by-case basis. 3,000 is too much volume to be looking at each case individually from a risk perspective. And so we had very extensive conversations with our corporate tax folks, our payroll teams, and our employment law teams to make sure that we were making some upfront decisions and that our tool has a way to give us advice about this ongoing. And then Olga, yay for my whole US team here.
Cool. Well, they all love you. I'm sure we love you. So let me just work this one out then. I just want to get my head around this. So you're getting 3,000 requests. Now, that's like 10 a day, isn't it? Or something. I mean, and that's including weekends. But so you're getting a load of these requests. So let's say I send in a request. I'm a HubSpotter and I want to work somewhere remotely. How would I do this? I'm filling it in on some tool somewhere and then it goes into you. And then, what are my chances of actually having my request accepted?
Yeah, pretty high. We actually have a pretty high accept rate. And again, it was important for our workforce and what is, how we think about our global footprint that we say yes as much as possible where we can. So I'll tell you, Brian, if you were a revenue generating employee for HubSpot, this is where you probably have the most restrictions. Just because the reality is when you have a lot more responsibility.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
PE, and that's really, where the dollars are is when you start generating revenue in other countries. So we've been very thoughtful to be very careful about those folks. But more broadly, we provide a lot of flexibility. How it works is 24/7. This tool is available. We've got some directional policy online, but we recommend people to just go in the tool, and we even have a way for them to play. So even that 3,000 is like formal requests, but we actually see a higher volume of requests for folks who are just trying to figure out where they can go in the tool. So you can kind of do hypothetical requests that don't necessarily flow through the whole workflow. But we've been very thoughtful about the policy as sort of the first step of where can you go, thinking about immigration, tax risks, and all of that. Hey, and then speaking of tax, my program manager of tax just said woohoo in the team too. So this is a big lift.
Anand's in the house. So how does it work then? Because presumably, you're based in Portland, and let's say you're going on to be in, I don't know, Houston, you're just traveling down there for some reason and you're working for just a week or so, I guess you may not have to do a request just for that. So is there like sort of, but if you were going for a month or something, I'm just trying to keep it domestic in the US at the moment. We'll get on to international later. But let's say you want to go from Portland to Houston and you're doing it. At what point would you have to issue, would you actually have to ask for a request?
Yeah.
And how long could you do it for?
Domestically, I think is a very different perspective just because, so we actually have a little bit more like a cleaner process for that. So we actually just ask people to, over a certain threshold, update your workday. And so that's actually a cleaner and more simple process. It's the international that we focus because that's the greater risk. We have people going to places we aren't maintaining payroll.
I was starting simple. I was going to get more complex. I was starting on the simple side because even domestically, you've got presumably state taxes and issues to deal with. Okay, but so you can then move, and it's presumably it's the same when you're hiring new recruits. Then you don't mind where they are within reason.
We hire very broadly across the US. That's right.
Okay, so let's then make it a bit more complex. Let's take internationally. So, Emily, you decide that you want to work you're in Portland. You decide you want to work in Costa Rica, for sake of argument, because I know you told me you were on vacation there.
Right.
So tell me about that. How would that happen then?
Yeah, so I would go ahead and put my request into the tool. It's really important to immigration is sort of like the biggest reason we end up saying no is just because as a US citizen, it can be tough, but we are open to nomad visas as long as there's some like clear documentation. This is an area that is evolving fast and there's a lot of gray area. So I would submit my request. A big piece of this is we've been partnering really closely with our people business partners to make sure that we've got a good workflow for managers. One of the things that I think long-term is really critical is that we have a culture that empowers managers to manage globally. And part of that is knowing when is it okay for your employee to be able to work abroad or not. So when I was in Costa Rica, actually, this was a big part of what we were considering doing because I was in the middle of some major deadlines this summer and major projects. So having some work continuity was helpful. So submitting a request, and that was perfect. And we wanted to make sure my manager had the ability to have that conversation of how are you going to keep on, focused. And so we have some good manager enablement and they can say no. We want to make sure managers are able to have that conversation with their employees to say, this is the wrong time, this is the wrong time zone or whatever, to make sure that if you're working abroad, this isn't just a workation where you're checking emails, that you're able to be able to deliver on your job. Yeah,
it's still work, it's not a vacation. So we talked in terms of intentionality and intentional flexibility. How do you balance the needs of the business with the desires of the employees?
I'm glad you asked this, Brian, because I think this is the hard work that we're doing, I think, in 2025 and into 2026. Like I said, HubSpot's growth and a lot of the focus over the last few years was on personally driven mobility. What we are trying to do going forward and the work that we have to do is almost get back to the basics and think about when we're intentionally growing. That may mean that there's some more business-driven mobility out there, and we have opportunities to invest in that. And so we're actually working through and developing, kind of refreshing our policies in this area and going on a roadshow to the business to say, hey, mobility is a lever for flexibility for employees, and it's a strategic lever for how we grow intentionally. So thinking about critical skill sets, critical team members, areas where we want to infuse an existing HubSpot, culture and experience in a new team in a new country. We're starting to see a lot more uptick in some of the traditional things that we've been doing in mobility industry for years.
So will you then, by the way, to the audience, if you've got any questions for Emily about HubSpot, then just write them in the comments box and we'll try and take your questions. But Emily, just let me just ask this question. If there's a location that you decide is strategically important, is that something that you will then liaise with the HubSpot powers that be, say, well, what can we do about getting more people into that? Or is it more employee driven?
This is an evolving space. So historically, in the last few years, it's been very employee driven. But actually, we are doing a lot more, and we've had the opportunity to have these conversations with leaders because our scope of our team is expanding. So we've been leaning heavily into our location strategy work. So when we talk about intentionally distributing our workforce of the future, that's a lot of the work that our team has been heavily involved in. I've been heavily involved in. How do we hire, move, and grow HubSpotters globally more thoughtfully? And so that's given us a seat at the table to be able to have the conversation of how can we use mobility as a lever to assign people to grow new offices. And so we're doing some creative things there that I think are really exciting.
I'm loving this. So and I suppose to me, it's just sort of dawning on me that this is not just flexibility. This is intentional flexibility.
That's right.
So it's not flexibility would be, well, this is what the employees want, this is what we'll do. But intentional means that actually you're looking at it from a strategic point of view and says, yes, we'll be flexible, but actually we'll be flexible, but these are the areas we want to be particularly flexible or indeed inflexible in, for whatever the business reason might be. That is so cool. How important is technology to you to be able to manage all this and using, automation and maybe AI to manage your compliance and your approvals?
Yeah, it's so funny because with all of the essentially the ChatGPTs of the world, AI has almost taken a new lens. But even before that, we were using, automation in the way that we processed all of these requests. And so that's a really, it has been and will continue to be a major way that we think about how we manage mobility at scale at HubSpot. It allows us to create that flexibility. A lot of the reasons why companies can't provide that level of flexibility is because the administration is so onerous. And we've been able to really take an approach of like, okay, we will allow the things that are light lift for us, and we can process those requests in a very automated way. So I think, you can't start to go down the journey of allowing flexibility and personal flexibility without using AI and technology. More broadly, I think AI is really helping my team find the balance. So kudos to all of my super users of AI on the mobility team. We've been embracing it very enthusiastically to think about how are we able to up-level the human aspects of what we do in mobility. It's helping us show up more human, taking away some of the grunt work, the high volume repeatable tasks, helping us customize. We've got some really cool tools where we prepare for meetings. We, look at the profile of the person and practice how we would deliver these conversations, what questions we should anticipate. And so it's really helping my team and myself show up on a completely different level with our stakeholders and our customers. And so that's super, super exciting.
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out to Benevo's own, we call it MI, Mobility Intelligence, and some of the tools. I mean, some of this stuff that is coming is just awesome. And I mean, the only comment I'd make is that whatever technology you're using now, it's probably the worst technology you're ever going to use, because the next one is going to be just blowing it away. So I'm hearing comment from Laurie. I'll bring Laurie's comment on. Great to hear how the team is embracing it to up-level the human aspect, show up more human. I love that phrase, to up-level the human aspect, show up more human. That's so
right.
cool.
I really see, I think AI, there's been fear of it taking your job away. And I think one of the things that I love that our CEO at HubSpot said was that AI is not going to take your job, but a human who uses AI might. And so I really think this is where your best self can be can be augmented and aided, and it really helps us fill in the gaps of what our strengths and weaknesses are, so that we are showing up even more effectively for our customers and for our partners.
And a question come in from Jeanette Matula, a good friend of the show. So Jeanette said this, she said, does HubSpot only have remote roles, or are there traditional assignments also?
This is something that we're restarting. So we almost had a gap. We had assignments early on, again, very much to drive our global growth. And that's coming back. So as we sort of have stabilized post-pandemic and thinking about where we want to be globally, we're seeing a resurgence of assignments, but honestly, not at major scale. This is an area where we're thoughtful, where we are wanting to make sure we're having measured investments, that we're really thinking about long-term career growth versus just transferable skills. And I think that's really because we think about location more from a time zone and proximity perspective versus like an in-office perspective. And so I don't anticipate us ever having like major, there's mobility programs out there that have where there's more in-person requirements around the job, where traditional assignments will stay at volume for a long time. That's probably in the SaaS industry and in a very hybrid led focus, that probably won't be the case. Where we're going to see assignments is in growing our global footprint.
Cool. Let me move on to another question, which is the element of cost. I mean, mobility typically can be expensive, but my understanding is that you operate a cost neutral model. So can you talk a little bit about how HubSpot provides flexibility, but not necessarily financial support for self-driven moves? Just tell us a bit about how that all works in practice.
Yeah. Our philosophy about mobility is that the investment of the company should match the business results. And so this is where when we can allow a lot of personal flexibility, because when we basically adjust the cost profile of that move to very low or minimal. And what that means is that puts a lot of pressure on the employee. Like we all know this, moving, whether it's for an assignment or job or for personal reasons, even within the EU, is challenging. It's exhausting, it's complex, it's confusing. There's a lot to do. Moving even domestically within the US can be challenging. And so it's really important to acknowledge that and set clear expectations from employees up front. But frankly, we've kept our cost profile really minimal when the move is driven solely by personal need. Now, the other part of this is a conversation with the business of like better understanding, why would you be open to this? Is it because we kind of are neutral about location, and so therefore this person can do that job from somewhere else? Or is there actually a benefit to the business to have that person there? It's almost like we find ourselves talking the business back into some business-driven moves when we realize, oh, there's actually an underlying need here for you to have a team member in this location. Let's start having a different conversation. And that's where we see sort of our strategic transfers coming back into the mix. But ultimately, if we've determined that this is just about flexibility, personal flexibility, that's where we've limited the support to be very oriented towards self-service, giving resources, connecting them to the right things, setting good expectations, and then making sure any kind of HubSpot compliance aspects are handled. So, work authorization and payroll needs to be clean and easy and clear.
So if there is a visa cost or a tax filing cost, that's down to the employee themselves?
No, the immigration we support. So that's an area where it's like on us to make sure they're compliant. It's easier for us to do. A lot of our mobility is within the EU, so the cost of that is pretty low.
Yeah. But if someone has moved and there's a tax cost, that's just their choice.
That's right. That's right. Part of the sign up for when you want to move to an international location, for sure.
Now, and I mean, we haven't really got time to get into it. I'm just curious about what happens with comp. Presumably comp just stays the same. It's not.
Well, internationally, we typically localize compensation. This is, again, your personal choice for going to another location. So we're this is about transparency and clarity up front. That's one of the things I love about our culture is the transparency that we have to say the hard things. And part of the expectation setting up front is what compensation looks like when you want to work in another location. And so that's part of our expectation setting and part of the conversation for personally driven moves.
Let me move you on to what I often think is the most difficult question in mobility, which is about return on investment. I mean, how do you measure, or do you measure, and how do you measure, what's happening, the data, the decision making, and and quantifying the impact of mobility on the business? Is that something you measure, you monitor? Is it possible? Tell us about what how you deal with that.
The age-old question of mobility, and I think
I said it wasn't.
I 100%. I'm going to be transparent. This is an area that we haven't spent as much time on. I think we're in a move fast culture, and we're working off of a lot of anecdotal decision making, but it's something that we have a really strong mind to. And so we've been initiating conversations with our people analytics team and thinking about how do we create sort of a ongoing look at our program participants and looking at things like how does that impact engagement? So how does allowing this level of flexibility create stronger intent to stay and retention? So these are some of the measures that we're looking to build on a regular cadence. We've done some studies one-offs for one program here or there. And what we want to do is build some like an ongoing rhythm and dashboard to where we can measure success using some of our broader company performance data, engagement data, intent to stay and retention data to evaluate how our programs are contributing or correlated to some of the broader workforce metrics we want to be influencing.
That's amazing. We've only got a couple of minutes left. So really my very last question to you is, or not so much a question, actually, is what are the lessons that you think you could share for other leaders? There'll be other mobility leaders watching the show today. What can other companies learn from your approach, HubSpot's approach to mobility?
I think what's so important is two things. One, we're experiencing a pretty significant workforce revolution right now, or transformation, right? I've read some interesting stats about how the AI things that are happening in the industry right now are accelerating change in our economy at 10 times the rate of the Industrial Revolution, which can be a little unsettling, can't it? But I really see that as an opportunity. And I find that mobility leaders and mobility professionals are folks who are very experienced working cross-functionally, internationally, and solving really complex interdisciplinary problems. Guess what the challenges of the next few years are going to be? Interdisciplinary, complex, international, cross-functional problems. And so I really think, we have an opportunity to see where there's company level problems that are being tried, that we need to solve, and entering the conversation, bringing a point of view. And I think that sometimes we like to stay in our lane, or it's where it's comfortable. It's where we have expertise. We're all mobility professionals are, deep experts in their field. And so I would challenge all mobility professionals, not just leaders, to really think about how can you bring a point of view to some of the problems that our companies, the workforce problems that our companies are trying to solve today. And that's how we stay on the front edge of the wave. I think about like this riding the wave. How are we surfing the wave rather than getting kind of taken under by it?
That's amazing. We're at the end of our show. I'm just going to bring on our other guests. We had Anna Sophia Walsh from Fragoman. We had Julie Barron from Vialto. And of course, we have our producer, Tally Gorin. We are done for the week, but we are back next week when we're going to be talking about breaking the swim lane, rethinking career journeys in talent mobility, how you can move from one function, one area to another, and have that varied journey, maybe within the same company, but different roles. Fascinating conversation with Louise Atkinson at Babcock. It's been an amazing show. Thank you to Anna Sophia. Thank you to Julie. And especially big thanks to our special guest today, Emily Stirling from HubSpot. That's it. We are done. Everybody have a great, great week. And we will see you this time next week. Take care, everybody, and have a great, great week. Bye.